Former Trump attorney John Eastman has filed a motion asking a federal judge to reconsider or stay an order requiring him to hand over multiple documents to the January 6 House Select Committee, pending Eastman's appeal. Judge David Carter recently ordered Eastman to give the committee emails that allegedly show efforts to disrupt Congress's confirmation of President Biden's 2020 election win, the certification there. Judge Carter wrote that the documents are either not protected by attorney-client privilege or exempt from that privilege because they were related to a crime or attempted crime. Specifically, the judge noted Eastman had flagged to Trump's attorneys their supposed evidence of voter fraud in Fulton County, Georgia, was inaccurate. But Trump and his legal team went on to file a complaint in federal court nevertheless, quote, with the same inaccurate numbers without rectifying, clarifying, or otherwise changing them. Politico also has new reporting about Eastman laying out a new plot to undermine elections. In new audio from a speech he gave last week, Eastman appears to be pushing for ways to set up a flood of lawsuits in state courts and challenging the midterm results already. Joining us now, national investigative correspondent at Politico, Heidi Przybyla. Heidi, it's great to see you. Boy, this is an amazing bit of audio that you've unearthed of John Eastman basically coaching people about how to keep a paper trail so that they can file lawsuits about these midterm elections. Let's listen to a little bit of what you found.
They have to be registered, but they can register same day at a time. But the requirements for identification to do same-day registration is a little bit different. That ID must have an address in the county and it must have a photo. In other words, you can't do the same-day registration just with your utility bill or something. So same-day registration is allowed, but it's still not part of the ordinary rules, right? And so this is 1-4-5.7. Again, get that book out and have it circled to know what these things are there. These are grounds for challenging somebody if they come in and their ID says they live down in Las Cruces and they're trying to vote in Albuquerque. So, well, your ID is not valid. You don't get to do that. You don't get to register here today with an out-of-county ID. And so just kind of have some sense of what you're allowed to do with it. So, find out who your three people are, look at their registrations, and if they're all in the same party, get in touch with the county chairman. Say, I'd like to be the number 2 judge on that thing so that they can meet their statutory bipartisan requirement and get it rolled. Because then you're the ones making the decisions, not just raising the questions about the decision. Here's the consequence to you if you don't allow me to see it. You really want to walk down that path, right? Do it politely, right? Do it gingerly. And if they say, we're calling the police on you because you're obstructing, no, I'm doing what the statute authorizes me to do, let's go ahead and call the police, and we'll see if they'll enforce 1-2-26 against you. All right? But politely, with a smile on your face. Okay?
So, Heidi, let's take a step back and tell our viewers who exactly John Eastman is talking to there, what he's asking them to do, and you're struck by the brazenness or lack of shame, however you look at it, of a guy who's under investigation, who drafted a document coaching people how to overturn the last election in 2020, now getting ahead and doing it again.
Yeah, Willie, as you know, John Eastman is the architect of Trump's failed attempt to overturn the last election. And we've done a lot of reporting on this army of poll workers and poll watchers that Republicans are trying to recruit to go to polling locations. And the big concern has been that they're going to just disrupt voting, that they're going to intimidate voters. But what you have here from John Eastman, who was the architect, is that the real goal here is for them to basically be the vehicle for creating the documentation that would be necessary to challenge upcoming elections. He speaks very explicitly and repeatedly urges them to build the case, build the documents, write everything down, and that those documents then can become affidavits that could be used in future cases, Willie. So the big concern here is that this army that is being built up, it may become disruptive because a lot of these people are coming in, they're believing that they are there to police fraud. They believe that they're going to be seeing fraud, so they could create disruptions. But the new revelation here is that that's not the main goal of the people who are pulling the strings, like John Eastman, like Cleta Mitchell, who's been organizing these summits all around the country, Willie, that the goal is really that these people will be the vehicle to create those legal disputes. And one other thing I wanted to mention, now this was a New Mexico summit. That's where John Eastman is now a resident. And it's also important to note that if you recall, there was a board during the primaries in New Mexico, Otero County, which refused to certify the election down there. Nobody understood what was happening. But Willie, what I was told was there were resolutions like that circulating all over the state. It was just Otero County that said, okay, we'll do it. We'll try this. We'll see what happens when we refuse to certify an election. The concern is that these people are going to create the documentation that could be used by a legislature or by a county board to say, we're not going to certify.
Jonathan Lemire, as Heidi says, John Eastman is a central figure in the attempted coup around the last election and a central figure in your book, The Big Lie. You wrote a lot about him. And now to hear him on tape again, given everything we know about him, all the judges that have asked for his documents and all the trouble he could be in, to be right back in that position saying, here's, guys, how we can gum up the system again and drag these things out if, in fact, we lose elections.
Yeah, unapologetic and shameless. That's what John Eastman's behavior is here. And you're right, he is a central character to the big lie, to everything Donald Trump and his allies tried to do after the 2020 election. Let's remember, it was his idea to set the fake elector schemes, to have states put alternate electors to the Congress that would allow Mike Pence to try to throw that out and therefore keep Trump in office. We know that Eastman was the one sending emails around afterwards going like, guys, we might have broken the law, and then potentially wondering if he might need a pardon. So he is someone who, well, let's just say, in the thick of things. So, Heidi, this is terrific reporting and obviously suggests that this it reiterates how the big lie is still going to be with us. And that talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing. Speak more broadly about not just Eastman's actions here, but how this is part of what the Republican ethos is now. We're seeing up and down the ballot campaigns already threatening to challenge election results if they don't like them.
And that is why you could see this potentially even in Republican states. Like I said, Otero County, there was no reason for that election to be challenged and for the board commissioners there to refuse to certify. The concerns, according to election officials who I talked to there, Jonathan, were that it really was a test run to see, okay, well, what would happen if we did refuse to certify an election? That is, of course, the biggest fear of a lot of elections officials that I talk to, is that you see this all kind of happening in coordination at the same time that now there's one piece here. You have individuals who could create this documentation. You have in the courts, now the Supreme Court potentially now hearing this case on the what's called the independent state legislature theory, which would allow state legislatures to have the final say in essentially determining the outcome of an election and potentially overruling our courts or bigfooting state officials who are supposed to have that final say. And you see how the pieces are potentially being put in place here for a much more successful version of what was considered in 2020 to be a really ham-handed approach, where they had a lot of these untrained poll challengers banging literally on the outside of these polling locations where votes were being counted. Now the goal is really to put these people in a position to have real power. They're asking them to serve as not only official party poll challengers, but also as workers, judges, people who are supposed to be the nonpartisan officials. And if you hear Eastman on these tapes, he's really explicit about basically using very narrow interpretations of the law, very technical interpretations, like people are supposed to speak audibly when they state their name and address when they come to vote. And if they don't, you should challenge that. Well, while that's technically true, if I'm sitting here and I'm challenging every single person who's coming in there, maybe I'm in a minority district even, and I'm a white person challenging these people, speak up, one after the other. Well, is that really enforcing the law, or is that voter intimidation? So you have the concern about intimidation, the reporting there about people showing up potentially armed at polling locations in Michigan. But again, the takeaway here, guys, is that this broader strategy is about laying a legal framework and precedent to empower people, even with meritless claims, to potentially challenge elections.